back when my oldest son Josh was 5 years old and in kindergarten, he decided he wanted to play soccer. He got put on an AYSO team, which in the first practice, the coach quit. So the assistant coach popped up to coach and asked me to be the assistant coach, and that's how I got to meet Nancy Rotering. Nancy Rotering and I have been friendly for 20 years now, and as they have been a member of HaKafa for quite a few years. I wanted you to see what the mayor of Highland Park has to say about Judaism and about the world. Welcome, Nancy Rotering. How the heck are you?
Dandy, you?
Fantastic. So here's where I want to start with you. It
Okay.
was 21 years ago, give or take, 20 to 21 years ago, when we were together at that first or second soccer practice, and you jumped up to become the soccer coach, and you asked me you asked for a volunteer to be an assistant, and I did it. So I became your assistant soccer coach. It
And
was
we
at
did not know what we were doing.
well, that you had Josh lead Duck Duck Goose at the end talks to what a great team we had. But as we left after that first practice, I turned to Rona and I said, that woman's going to be mayor someday.
No, you did not.
No, of course not. But it was the leadership that you showed. Here's where I want to start with you. I tell this to folks all the time. I mean, I think you're a great human being. We've known each other a
Oh,
long
back
time.
at you.
I think you're exactly what this town needs as a mayor.
Thank
I,
you.
I know that I know that you have sought other offices, and I hope that that happens someday because I think this
Oh,
country
thanks.
needs a you, and I
Oh,
really
thank
do
you.
for a lot of reasons. I'm not saying this to compliment you because I'll never be nice to you, but I'll always be honest with you. But here's where I want to. Here's where I
And
want
as
to.
I wipe away tears, it's not because of joy, it's because I'm overtired. Go ahead.
Here's where I want to start with you. You've campaigned.
I have.
I want, and I was particularly taken after your first campaign for Congress when you were interviewed somewhere and you talked about what it meant to you to be able to campaign. I want to
I love
ask
it.
you. I want to ask about the spiritual side of campaigning. Can you
That's
speak to the spiritual side of it?
I can totally speak to the spiritual side because it is what drives me in the decision to run. It's what drives me in the decision to serve. And it's what drives me as I have conversations with people, most importantly, people who look nothing like me, live nothing like me, believe things differently from me. So if that makes any sense, and excuse me, excuse me, there are all kinds of opportunities, and I don't want to sound too cliche, but truly it is from within that drive and that ability to relate and that ability to have the courage and the strength to say things and to put myself out there comes from. And here's a great example. I was running in my first race for city council against three current incumbents whose campaign was being run by the then mayor. The odds were not in my favor, shall we say. And it was the day before election day. I was ringing doorbells, talking to voters. It was snowing. I was like, this must be what Botox feels like because I can't feel my forehead. And my phone was ringing from the opposition in an effort to distract me from what I was doing. And it was really one of those moments where it's like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I've got little kids at home. This blows. My face hurts, and I am going to lose this race. I'd been running hard the whole time. And it was almost as though from spirituality, it was no, this is where I need to be. This is what I need to be doing. These are people I need to be talking to because they're not being represented right now. This is exactly where I needed to be. And in the end, came in first place. It all worked out. But it's one of those things. And here's another example. Excuse me. When I ran most recently for Attorney General, I found myself at a church on the west side of Chicago. I had just given myself a flat tire parking in front, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get home. This is kind of a neighborhood I've never been to in my life. I felt so welcome and so peaceful. And so this is, again, exactly where I need to be, speaking with people who had dealt with so much gun violence in their lives. And I was a person who had taken a stand and who had beaten the NRA and who said to them, we're not done yet. We need to move forward. We need to stay strong. And feeling the pain, feeling the frustration, feeling their sense of just people just don't even really care, and knowing again that that platform, that opportunity, again, I lost, but I had the chance to raise that subject in a much broader sense and to continue that conversation. So spirituality has been absolutely central to both the challenges, the successes, and the most importantly, the conversations that I've been able to have with just so many incredible people.
So, as I'm listening to you, what I hear coming out is your empathy. Uh, and you're defining, so maybe we need a definition here. What's your definition of spirituality? I'm not trying to demean what you said. I thought that was a beautiful answer. But when I
Oh,
said
thank
that,
you.
yeah, so what did that speak to? What is spirituality to you?
It is truly, and again, I don't mean to sound trite or weird, but it's almost like a higher calling to do what's right, to do what's just, to do what's difficult but necessary, and to face challenges because you know that at the end of all of those challenges, the world's going to be a better place if you face those challenges. And most importantly, if you bring others along with you while you're facing those challenges. And, I've got tales for days about the campaign trail and people being absolutely hideous and people being absolutely lovely. And you just never know day to day what you're going to come upon. But if you treat it as an opportunity for dialogue and conversation and sharing a sense of hope and a sense of focus. And again, I don't know if I'm answering your question, Bruce, but that to me is spirituality. So I think, excuse me, that my dad died suddenly 2 weeks after I was elected mayor of Highland Park. Gave me the sense of
Nancy, I lost
purpose
you. Nancy, I lost you
and
there for a
need
moment.
to do good in this world. Yeah, I saw the little thing that said internet unstable. I'm sure someone's gaming downstairs and messing with our internet. So where did you lose me? Dad, my
You're
story about my great dad?
in the middle of it. It's great, but you're frozen on my screens. There you are. There you are. Okay, keep going. It was a nice face we had you frozen on. Not to worry.
Okay.
Okay, so you're talking about your dad died 2 weeks after. Pick up from there,
My
please.
dad, right. So my dad died suddenly 2 weeks after I became mayor.
Yeah.
And literally our last conversation that we had had the last time I saw him was his saying to me, I really hope you run for Congress at some point. I think you'll do a great job. But most importantly from the story is he was the guy who literally, for as long as I can remember, said to me, if you see something wrong, you have to do something about it. You cannot walk away. You cannot look away. You cannot wait for somebody else to take action. It's on you to take action. And that's driven my entire life. So, his memory, I kind of joke, he's on my shoulder whispering in my ear from time to time, in these challenging situations. And it's even in the way I speak sometimes, I can hear his voice. So he's with me, his memory is with me, and the lessons that he taught me about what it means to be a Jew, what it means to be a person who believes in justice and who believes in taking action and tikkun olam. That's dad all over the place. So is it God? Is it dad? Is it spirituality? Is it generations of folks back in the old country? Whatever it is, that's what's driving me.
So what I hear you saying is that you subscribe to the notion that the king suggested that the arc of history bends towards justice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what does
And,
that
and
mean? I've been struggling with that. What does that mean?
it means that, so here's a great way to look at it. And it's kind of a tangent, but I think it'll help be a great illustration. So before I was in office, I was working on environmental advocacy education in Highland Park. And I got all the kids in the public schools, K-8, to work on these projects. My favorite project was this enormous footprint. The kids at Ravinia School painted this giant footprint, and then each little foot was painted. And so it was a footprint filled with footprints. It's each and every one of us taking that tiny step, whether it's reducing your carbon footprint, whether it's moving the arc towards justice. It's just one of those things that every single one of us, even though at the time it may feel small, and at the time it may feel like, well, what difference does this make? We saw that in the most recent election. Every single solitary vote, people could say, well, what difference does it make if I stay home? But we didn't. We all showed up. We all said, this is what matters. Each one of us took that one step, made that one vote, did that one thing that then in general moves things towards a better place.
Well, so that gets me questioning about what you think justice is. And I don't want to quite go there yet because, I listen
Okay.
to you talk and I'm like, you go girl, right? And so your spirituality, no, so I see that. I mean, that's what brought me to the rabbinate, right? That drive, that understanding of our spiritual need to do what is good and right. And so when I
Right.
see someone like you express that and want to see that and fulfill it through public life, I'm like, yes, that's what we need. And then when I see a Mike Pence stand up there and say the exact same thing, right? Say the exact same thing, and he is driven by spirit. And how many people are motivated like you are, who see the arc of justice been completely different and see it as their spiritual responsibility to seek higher office? How do you reconcile so much spirituality being thrown into a hodgepodge and that we get what we have now on our national scene and at our local scene?
One differentiating factor, and this may sound again kind of trite, are we going broader? Are we going narrower? Is it an exclusionary view of spirituality or an inclusionary view of spirituality? Are we helping people who have been other, who have been not brought into the fold? Or are we continuing to shun and push more out? And I think that really is a very simple but fine way to put it. And the more you can bring the folks into the tent, the more you can tell more people I've got your back versus mine is right and yours is wrong. Those are two vastly different views of spiritually determined actionality. And so I lean towards the more the merrier. Rob, my husband, will tell you anytime we have a party, I'm always like, bring more. We need more people. Feed more people, more strangers. I don't care. It's got to be driven by that, because if you look at Pence and how he has dealt with his spiritual decision making, it's always been a fine point towards distinguishing other versus us. And that's wrong. You can't view the world in a binary way. You have to see us all on this continuum of humanity. And how can we bring everybody back together?
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, and I happen to agree with you. And the tension in any religion, and this has been the history of Judaism from the Bible till now, is the tension in finding the balance between particularism and universalism. You become too particular, and you become myopic, and you shrink.
Right.
You become universal, you become everything, and you become too watered down, and you die. So do you want to
Right.
die from shrinkage, or do you want to die from expansion? I mean, that's an exaggeration, right?
Right.
So therefore, does spirituality, I'm not talking about religion,
Right.
does spirituality belong in the political realm? Do we want a political field that is driven by people's individual spirituality when we have that tension? Maybe the tension's healthy.
I think I think you want people to be motivated by something larger than themselves and their own gain. And for some folks, it's fame and glory. Let me tell you, politics not a great place for fame and glory if you want to get into it. For some, it's for money. I mean, let's call it. There are people who go into politics because they want power. I don't think any of that lands well, serves well, ends well, and it's pretty soul sucking. I think you may know I teach a class at Northwestern, Women in American Political Leadership, and we have a whole session on ethics and what does public service mean. And it's not, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's ethical. And one of the things I teach my students is at the very beginning, look in the mirror, find the eyes of your 6-year-old self, and then make sure that every day the actions that you take, you're comfortable sharing with those eyes of your 6-year-old self. You can pick a kid if you want, not yourself, if whatever, but it's more, how do you remain accountable to the pure and the innocent and the good in our world, and not, I'm in it for the power. We've all seen what happens when people lose their sense of purpose and self and accountability to a higher order than just their own self-aggrandizement.
What I came away with in the last election, particularly when the graduated income tax got defeated as badly as it did in Illinois,
Right.
And when justice organizations spent so much time and effort and money, including, and then the governor himself spent so much of his own money to try to get that passed,
Right.
and it got creamed as much as it did, which is ultimately
Right.
going to raise all of our state income taxes, right? I came to the realization of stuff that I have mentioned before and given lip service to, but now fully believe, right? And that is the trite saying that all politics is local. That what you're going to get people to moved on, and you know this, right? Is
Yep.
what people really care about is getting the stop sign on the end of their street, is getting, making sure their block is safe, however they define that. I mean, you make a living, not a financial living. You spend your
I know.
days spend your days picking up messages of people who largely call you because they're angry about something, I would imagine, or that they want
Right.
something. So speak to the
Right.
idea of we can care about the national, and definitely the national mattered here. But what really motivates and moves people is the everydayness of what's going on the ground level, on the school boards, at the city level, etc. Speak to that if you would.
Well, it should. And so therein lies the challenge. We have another election coming up April 6th. I would love to see the turnout that we saw in November. And I think this national election, that, obviously all elections are important. This one seemed to be for the soul of the nation. So this one we needed to really show up for. But by golly, you do need to show up when you're figuring out how the children in your community are going to be educated, or if you're going to be able to continue to have safe water, or if you're going to be able to have a fair and just police department. I mean, all of those decisions really do impact people day to day. What happens at the national level gets so much press and so much, it is almost for some, I think, entertainment, but it's not impacting your day to day life so much as the decisions that are made right here, right now. And yesterday I had a conversation. I know, Bruce, you often try to join us. We had a conversation with the clergy. I know you had other things going on, but we had a really good conversation about COVID and the impact on our community. And how do we get food to housebound seniors or people with disabilities? How do we make sure that housing issues are going to be addressed in a way that's fair and not a huge bottom dropping out of the entire housing market when the eviction moratoriums are on? How are we going to deal with getting people the right information about the vaccine? I mean, those are local issues.
Yeah.
Nothing at the national level other than the vaccine, which hopefully will be freed of the warehouses. I heard about that this morning. You know, will get out. But, at the end of the day, you want to know that, and I say this every summer, I don't want to find out that somebody died in their house from heat because they didn't have the ability to turn on the air conditioning. Like, those are the things that really do matter. And we need to make sure that the right people are in office, the right people who are doing it for the right reasons.
You touched a real nerve with me when you said that, because back in 1988, I was an intern through the Jewish Federation at the Ezra Multi Service Center in Uptown. And I had formed a relationship with a man by the name of Sam Cohen. I think his last name was Cohen, who was kicked out of a mental health institution in the 70s when they deinstitutionalized. He ended up on the street. And the summer of 1988 in August was one of the hottest on record in Chicago's history.
Right.
And we hadn't seen him for a few days. And he was living in an SRO without air conditioning. And I went to go find him a couple days later, and we found him. So you just touched a real nerve with me when you said that.
I'm
It is
sorry.
all no, but it's all local. It is all about
It
people to
is.
people.
It
Have you
is.
have you seen? Not to inject myself into this, but we're talking. No, you really hit a nerve there. No, I cared about him very much. Do
Oh,
you have you
good.
seen in your time in political office, in even on the local level? And I mean, look, I subscribe to the idea that if you give people the chance to care about something, they will, and sometimes they care too much. Have you seen an arc or a change in how people have related to you as an elected official over the past 10 to 12 years?
Um, yes and no. So, um, in my very first meeting as mayor, as we were waiting to get started, we sat there and we waited. Somebody goes, "Mayor," well, I'm waiting because nobody would call me that. So finally they were like, Nancy, you're it. You got to start the meeting. And I was like, oh, that's right. I'm the mayor now. And it took me a really long time to kind of believe it, not like an imposter syndrome way, but just in sort of what does it mean? What does it mean to be the mayor? And then we started these programs where we have third graders, all the third graders in Highland Park Public Schools come through City Hall, and we talk about why it's important to be an advocate and why it's important to have confidence in your voice and why you need to get involved in civic government. And then we put high school kids on commissions. That's when I started to relate to being a mayor as like a person that people looked up to, if that makes sense. Like I've always been a hard worker, and I've always been like, I'll do my job and I'll do it well and I'll be professional and I'll do it 24/7. And again, Rob thinks that I do it too much, and that's just how I'm built, because it is how I'm built. So, but then when those third graders became eighth graders and ninth graders and said, I remember coming to City Hall and you told us that our voices mattered, and now I want to be on a city commission, and I think I might want to run for mayor someday. Like that's when I was like, okay, I got this. Like more than I've balanced every budget, more than we passed the assault weapons ban, more than, gender neutral bathroom laws. We did all of that, but it's most important to me to have this new generation of, I call them current leaders, not future leaders. They're already leaders, being able to visualize and see that they can do this job, that they can have a voice, that they can set the agenda, and again, they can bend the art. So it's one of those things where, and don't tell anybody, but I always try to put a girl in as the mayor when we do our mock city council meetings.
Thank God.
Because
Thank God.
I'm the first girl mayor that this city's had, and we just hit 150 years last year.
Thank God.
Thanks. But it's one of those things where in political science, we see that girls visualize themselves as being able to be in politics just as much as boys up to college. And then in college, they drop off significantly, which is one of the reasons why I teach this class, because we need to have diverse voices sitting on the dais. We need to have all perspectives. We need to, and it's not just gender, it's everything. We need to be reflective of who we are to be a democracy. And so that's one of the things that I do. But back to your original question, how are people relating to me? I try to stay off of social media for the most part because it's just turned into such an awful cesspool. But if I can give people the sense that this is something that they can do, and there's one other strata that I reach out to. There are a whole lot of, it's usually moms who had professions, stepped off to take care of their families, and are now sort of going, well, what do I do? And the average age that a woman enters politics in the United States is 52. So one of the things that I do is a lot of outreach to people who are kind of like, okay, the kids are kind of moving on. What's my next gig? Can I get back into it? And my goal is always to say, hey, have you thought about politics? Have you thought about running for office? So I do a lot of recruiting of people to be on city commissions and to consider running for office.
Yeah, I felt it a real honor when I recruited myself to be on the Affordable Housing Commission. I wish I could have stayed on longer.
I do too.
I was very glad to be on that, and I'm so glad that we've had it.
Thank you.
When girls become benot mitzvah, I see this change. I mean, you say it changes around high school, college. I have seen with so many girls, and I didn't notice it early on because of my maleness, but I noticed early on, I mean, not early on, I started to notice how when girls hit around 12 or 13, so often when they have the chance to stand up, they get quiet.
Right.
And I started with permission of parents without trying to mansplain, which is I'm trying really hard is to tell girls when they stand up that this is the time to start using their voices, not allowing society that they've been telling them all along. Society sends these messages to girls to shut up. And when a girl isn't like that, society actually has a different idea of who and what they're bossy, what have you, right? How do you navigate that as you are using yourself as a model? How do you navigate that, what those messages that society sends young girls, and seeing girls that you know have voices that are so strong and powerful go into their throats? What do you do with that?
It's through a lot of storytelling. And, it's sort of interesting when the whole Me Too movement really was getting underway. Was when I was running for attorney general, and I said we got to change the human rights law in Illinois, because at the time there was an exception for the Illinois General Assembly in terms of what was sexual harassment, and there was a need for hotlines, and there was so much. I'm going to tie it to that, to be honest with you, and what I said to the younger women who I was working with at the time was, we all of us old ladies used to be hotties, and we know what the challenge is to walk down the street and not feel safe, and to not feel safe in a lot of places. And it's something as simple as, you know, if you run, do you wear both headphones, or do you just wear one because you want to make sure you can hear if someone's behind you? Basic things that girls and women have just brought into their lives that men just aren't even aware of. And if you scratch that surface, that then gets to what else is happening when people are 13. Their bodies are changing. Don't look at me. Don't look at me as a woman. Don't look at me as someone who could potentially be sexualized. There's a whole bit of that, which is also why I think a lot of girls become quiet. They don't want that attention. They're not ready for that attention. They don't know how to handle that attention. Um, and again, back to social media, back to general media. I mean, there's so much sexualization and focus on physicality that starts at such a preposterous age that people do it as a protective thing. I think for a lot of them, I think for those who are willing to put themselves out there and draw attention to themselves, they're getting a whole lot of other attention. And so let's segue now back into politics and back into public service. If you look at what happens to women when they run for office, and there's an unbelievable New York Times piece from about 2 years ago with an accompanying video that talks about the unbelievable amount of stuff that people will say to women who dare to run for office or dare to advocate for a challenging position. And it literally is boiled down, I think, to something really basic, which is physical safety. It's horrible. But look at what happened to Gretchen Whitmer. Look at what happened to the poor Secretary of State of Michigan. I mean, do they do that to men? Yeah, but there's still this innate down deep sort of fear of not being protected. It's horrible. It's horrible. So back to the point of, if there are more, then they're less other. If there are more of us in office, then we're not the woman candidate, the woman mayor. If you look at the press coverage of women in office, there is so much that's discussed about what did she wear?
I
Who
know. Oh
cares?
God, it makes me
And
crazy. Makes me
and
crazy.
Hillary Clinton would joke about, yeah, I wear pantsuits because we already know I'm wearing pantsuits. So we don't need to talk about me wearing pantsuits anymore. Maybe you'll listen to what I have to say. And again, if you look at Kamala Harris, she's got a uniform. We're not going to talk about it anymore because we're going to listen to what she has to say. She took that variable out of the equation.
Yeah.
So I try to do it through storytelling. There was a situation when I was running for attorney general. You have to go to all these different Democratic committees and ask for their support. And we were down in Kankakee. And it had been a long day. For those of you who know Illinois geography, we had already been in Peoria. We had driven across to Kankakee. My husband's family has a farm in Kankakee, so we did a quick video in front of the farm. And in the process, the car had ended up in a ditch, so we got pulled out of the ditch, and we had to drive up to. I mean, it was like one of those days that never seemed to end. And I got up and went into this room, again, total strangers, went up to a gentleman with my literature and said, "Hi, I'm Nancy Rotering, running for attorney general. I'd love to talk to you for a few minutes. Do you have a minute?" And he said, "I can't hear you." And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Do you have a hearing disability? Do you want me to speak more slowly?" And he said, "No, you're a woman. I don't hear women. You sound just like my nagging wife.
Oh
I
God.
don't hear you." So here I've been like pulled out of a ditch, impure, like, oh, it was one of those moments where you kind of go, what do I do? Like, I didn't feel the blood boiling in my face. I didn't feel the pounding in my ears. I kind of chuckled to myself and I thought, let's see if I can get you to hear me in a little bit. So then we gave our speeches and I talked about access to healthcare and I talked about the importance of clean water and I talked about runoff and agriculture and things, the environment, things that would matter to somebody who lived in Kankakee County. And afterwards, he came up and he shook my hand. And he said, I do want to take your literature. And I said, I really appreciate that you did hear me. But, how
Well,
do
good for
women,
him
well,
in the end, I guess.
but how do women, oh, and by the
Not
way,
good for him. I take that back. For the record, I
okay,
take that back. He never should have said
okay,
that to you in the first place, jerk.
poo poo,
All right, go
adios.
ahead.
But, 8 people were running for that seat. 3 of us, no, 2 of us had shown up. So who are you going to listen to? The guy who couldn't even be bothered to drive down here to talk to you to get your vote? Or are you going to listen to the 2 of us, one of whom, didn't reach him the way I did? So how do you teach girls to have that confidence, to have that strength, to not be beaten down and feel like, well, he didn't want to, that hurt my feelings. It takes a while, and it takes storytelling, and it takes other people going ahead of you and sharing those stories back and saying, yeah, I totally know how you feel. Here's how to get past that. So yay for you for working with the girls when they're going through their B'nai Mitzvah, because
Trying to
it's
figure it
hard.
out.
Yeah.
Trying to find that balance again of not mansplaining, but wanting women's voices to be heard.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shift a minute. You said something when you were talking about your father, and you spoke beautifully about your father.
Oh, thanks.
Obviously, an important person in your life. And you mentioned within that you don't know if it was Jewish values, Tikkun Olam, what your father, what it was. Talk about your Jewish life growing up.
My Jewish life growing up was not very present, interestingly. So my
Doesn't sound
dad,
that way. I'm cutting you off. It doesn't sound that way. Maybe not direct,
so
but it doesn't sound that way. But go
right.
ahead.
So values, morals, um, purpose, yes. But so you can see I have blonde hair thanks to the hair salon, but my youth, it was actually blonde. And I'm tall. I don't look Jewish if you're going to go that route. And people would say to me, you're not really Jewish. You don't speak Hebrew. So I had to beg my parents to send me to Sunday school. They were like, whatever, we're not doing this. They were very to the other direction. And so we went to Lakeside. I made it through 8th grade, and then through a ridiculous story that again involved my dad, I got yanked out of the Sunday school in the 8th grade. So never confirmed, no bat mitzvah, on my own. And that's sort of
Oh,
how
can
I
you tell
was.
us why you got yanked, or is it not worth telling us? Because now I'm curious.
So
If you'd
it's
rather tell me off record, you can. Because I don't. If it's something about
I'll
Lakeside, I don't
share the
want to hear
story.
it. Go ahead.
All participants are dead, so it's fine. So I don't know what we were doing in my 8th grade class, but for some reason signs were placed on the wall, and they said girl, boy, American, Jew, athlete, whatever. They were all these different like labels, and you were supposed to stand under the label that best described you. And the whole class stood under Jew, and I went under American. And the teacher gave me a hard time and said, you need to recognize that no matter what country you live in, you are always a Jew. Okay, so that's an interesting way to make that point. My dad went bananas because I was embarrassed. I was a 13-year-old girl. I was not this. I was very shy. I didn't talk when I was that age. And my dad went ballistic and said, that's not inclusive. That's not fair. You put people on the spot. We're out of here. And that was the end of it.
So let me just tell you as an aside. I do that with 10th or 11th grade, something very similar. And
uh-huh.
rarely do I get someone who identifies first as Jewish.
Interesting.
And I don't embarrass
Interesting.
anyone. I don't
Thank
think.
you. Thank you.
Okay, so that was the end of it.
So that was
And
the end of that.
okay.
And yes, we had a Christmas tree. Both of my parents were raised Jewish, but we had, German Jews, Christmas tree, whatever. So we did Hanukkah because I was still in Sunday school. And even after Sunday school, we still did Hanukkah, and we did Passover. So we did the holidays and we did the philosophy, but I didn't speak Hebrew. And I was with a crowd of friends who were very, very about Israel, spoke a lot of Hebrew. I couldn't sing Happy Birthday in Hebrew. And I knew answers to questions in AP US history related to Christianity and the Reformation that nobody else seemed to be reading about. So they were like, you're not really Jewish. And I was like, that was really painful. And yes, I am. Off I went to college. And in the 80s, when I was in college, there was a huge evangelical movement. And I regularly had well-intentioned friends showing up at my door going, I'd like to give you a gift. Really? Did you bring me a cookie? No, I want to share with you the word of God. And I was like, can't deal with this. So I went to Hillel every Friday and said, these are my people. I had no idea what they were saying because I didn't speak Hebrew and I didn't really know many of the prayers. I didn't know many of the songs, but I learned them.
Hmm.
And that's how I became more of who I am now as a practicing Jew. So I had Judaism. I didn't have the traditions. I didn't have the prayers. I didn't have the songs. I didn't have the stuff that goes with who we are as Jews. And now I am married to someone who isn't Jewish, but we celebrate everything. And you see us from time to time in services. And my kids all identify as Jewish.
Hmm.
So
So given that, well, that's so it sounds like your Judaism was very you driven for your family, even.
I think pretty much most of me is me driven.
Wait, do you have to remind me? You have a sister, right?
I do have a sister.
Okay.
I do. She's
Okay.
8 years younger.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Was she because of you raised a certain way or not? I don't want to get into family stuff that I don't know about. I'm just
Oh
it
no
would,
no 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 no. So
yeah.
so we're 8 years apart. So she's like a different generation, and she did not have any interest in going to Sunday school. She didn't go to. I don't think she went. I think maybe she went once, and that was it. And then my family moved to Connecticut when she was in high school. There were like no Jews there. So she, again, tall, she's taller than me, blonder than me. She really, nobody knew what their religion was. And again, that's just how my family operated. She also married a guy who isn't Jewish. She divorced him. And I'm not sure how her kids view themselves. She kind of goes back and forth and tries to teach them.
So you had this Hillel experience at college.
Mm-hmm.
What is your Judaism to you now?
Everything.
Ooh, that's a big word.
And it's not, it's what drives me as a person. Again, I still don't know much Hebrew. And we did just light the candles last night.
You and every
uh,
other Reformed Jew, but go ahead.
right,
And conservative Jew for that matter, but go ahead.
but to that end, um, it drives me in terms of speaking out now, most importantly, when there's anti-Semitism. There's an organization that I was a part of that affiliated with other groups who were resoundingly anti-Semitic, and I called them out. And they didn't, it was a mistake. It was an inadvertent error. I didn't let it pass. I didn't say, I bet you didn't intend this. I highlighted it for them because I feel like at this time in particular, there's so much anti-Semitism that's being given a pass when nothing else is being given a pass. So we need to bring that front and center. We need to talk about it. We need to identify it. And we need to help people recognize that stuff that they don't even realize they're saying is anti-Semitic. So, that's one of the things that I feel like I'm doing. We're going through challenges with people who are very fraught right now. If you look at the mental health of our populace, people are very fragile, but they've been given permission to be horrible, hideous, angry, nasty, way, way, way beyond what's appropriate for the situation. I feel like from my Judaism, I'm trying to hear them and bring them back to a point of civil discourse. And how do we problem solve this versus I suck, you're pissed, let's just go blast each other on social media, So
Any luck with that? Any success?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Well, look,
I go
most
on
people
a lot
just
of
want.
walks.
A lot of people just want
I
to be
do a lot
heard.
of staring at the sky. Exactly.
Yeah.
And when their world is out of control, and there's nobody who can hear them, or the people around them who normally hear them are equally out of control. Like, most people, if there's a crisis, there's still somebody that you can reach out to who's not dealing with a crisis. But we've got like this literally global crisis going on. So who do you reach out to? So I'm just going to tell you, like, you and I both got these new dogs in our lives, and we're spending way, way, way more time outside than we ever did. There's a lot of looking at the sky and reflecting and thinking and breathing, and how do I stay stable and sane and able for my brethren.
So, in addition to the microaggressions, and I will use that phrase, that you express growing up, you don't look Jewish. That is a form of microaggression,
Right.
Have you experienced directly some of the nastiest types of Have you been the victim of anti-Semitism as of late?
Absolutely. As of late, Let me think about that. So again, remember, I don't read the comments and I don't read a lot of the social media stuff. Um, I actually, when the mask mandate came in, was told I was a Nazi. That really was painful because, as so many of us lost family members in the Holocaust, and a few of those people I phoned directly and I said, "Look, I get it. You don't like this. I am not a Nazi, and let's have this conversation." They were brutal conversations with a lot of folks who also lost family members in the Holocaust. So it's like, let's figure out why you decided you could go from zero to nuclear in this conversation without bothering. And some of them are friends. I mean, I neighbors. I mean, I said, I can see your house while I'm talking to you. Why could you not stand on the sidewalk and share your frustration? Why did you have to go online and call me a Nazi and fuel those fires? So that whole thing was its own beast. In terms of current situations and anti-Semitism, no,
Do you feel like we really are being threatened more right now than we have been in the past in
absolutely,
America?
absolutely,
Hmm.
horrifyingly so. And what scares me more is how many people seem to be like, well, they don't really mean it, or you guys are fine. It's like these ridiculous comments. So that's why with this other organization, I went straight at this situation and I said, look, you guys, I'm going to assume you are not intentionally doing this. And I know they weren't, but we got to find the process and we got to solve this problem so this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
There was a great rabbi that I know Peter Noble from Beth Emet, and he had a phrase, do what you need to do to feel Jewish every day. And that to me was my moment of that day. It was like, again, I don't even think the people in this organization knew I was Jewish. And I was like, you know what? Who cares? This is wrong, and this has to stop.
Those of us who occupy spaces on the left have been more and more challenged by the cancel culture,
Right.
because cancel culture really grew out of keeping Jews out of quote unquote safe spaces because of a view of our relationship to Israel, which in and of itself is anti-Semitic, even though we conflated the two
Right.
throughout our history.
Right.
Do you consider yourself a Zionist?
It's interesting. I was not raised a Zionist, and I'm not sure. And maybe Bruce, you can give me the background on like who went which way and who went the other way and why. Um, but I went to Israel a few years ago, fell in love, would love to get back there. I have very obvious and real concerns about the current government and decisions that are being made. I think there is a very real opportunity for a two-state solution and a pluralist society. Um, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that there's so much great and good that comes out of our people that now is dealing with these other decisions that are kind of, inhumane, horrible, horrible, horrible decisions.
I
But
think it's as I'm very upfront about my Zionism, and I love Israel, and I'm so upset with it, and I can't
right,
figure out what it's going to take for me to have a divorce from it, and I just still can't.
right,
Even though I agree with you, and I accept the notion from the left, and I hate putting the left in a big, because that's right, putting everyone in a box,
right.
that says you can be a legitimate uh, you can criticize Israel. You can be anti-Zionist and not anti-Semitic. I do actually subscribe to that, but I don't necessarily know that everyone on the left understands that difference, and
I
so
agree.
it creeps in a lot. So speak to that for a moment, if you would.
Well, what's appalling to me is then how there's cannibalization among Jews about people who aren't all or nothing. Back to my very earliest point. Things in this world can't be so binary. You have to look at the spectrum. You have to understand and see maybe where there might be cracks or fault lines and work to resolve those. But this all or nothing stuff, first of all, where does it get us? It gets us hating each other. It gets us angry. It gets us not talking. It gets us just moving further and further apart. So I think there needs to be a lot of conversation around this and hopefully governmental movement at some point in Israel. But no, you can't. You can't divorce yourself. You can't.
It's so hard to be in your world and not be black and white today. even as you speak to that. It's
Right.
really hard not to be black and white when people want the comfort of knowing, right? So people hear me all the time and I talk about that religion is the place where religion should be, and by its very nature is the place where you go where it's okay not to have the answer, not to find the answer.
Right.
And when the ultimate expression of not having the answer, God's name, became the answer, right? We became binary and we imposed black and white on grayness. My favorite color now is gray, right? Because the more gray I become, the more I can actually say that I can hear you.
Right.
And I'm not very good at it because I know, because I seriously, I still know I'm right. If ever, I still deep down believe, Nancy, that if everyone would just agree with me, we would be okay. And I understand that everyone else thinks that as well. And as much as I tell myself I'm not as right as I know I am, I still don't believe that. And so I push for this grayness because I
Yeah.
think it's so important. And at the same time, I don't want to let go of those key ideas that you started with about what justice are and about right is and about the universalism, which is not about assimilation and losing identity, but owning identity and being okay with other people doing it as well because it's not zero sum.
I think the beauty of our world is if you can approach it with an open heart and as a chance to learn, as a chance to explore. Remember that 6-year old self that you're supposed to be looking at in the mirror. What was a day like when you were 6? Who knew? And who knew who was going to barf on your back in line on the way to recess? Who knew who was going to have a brownie in their lunch? Who knew what the teacher was going to, I mean, there was so much. Every day was kind of like, all right, how do we keep that spark of
Mm.
curiosity and love of each other and interest in each other and get past this? You've harmed me, you've done me wrong. I mean, there's plenty of that. If you want to hang out on the dark side, the world is full of it. And it's incumbent on all of us to do what Bruce and I are doing morning, noon, and night while we walk our dogs, looking at the sky and going, okay, the stars are really clear tonight. Okay, the sunrise is really pink this morning. Okay, I can't see a single star. And recognize that the world is a huge, beautiful, challenging, insane place, but also that we each of us bring this gift of our child self and our ancient wise self. And somewhere in between, you had all these experiences. How did you get those? And what does that bring you as a contributing part of the world?
Amen. I think that's a great way for us to start moving towards the end of this conversation. But before we do, first of all, for the record, it's Noah's dog, and I know the history of yours as well. I'm just Noah's definitely the alpha. I don't want to hear from Noah. Definitely the alpha. I'm the beta.
Okay. Okay.
I want to hear just really quickly about your kids. Give us an
Oh,
update,
thanks. Thanks.
please.
So the oldest, Charlie, who's supposed to be working on Capitol Hill, came home at the very beginning. So here, Bruce, this is kind of the story of how we met, actually. So Charlie was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 2.5, and I became his pancreas. So that's how I ended up being the soccer coach, not knowing how to play soccer. Was the soccer coach quit, and my kid wanted to play soccer, and I knew I had to be there. So I got a book and learned how to coach soccer, and in the process, we played Duck Duck Goose with Joshy, and Bruce became my co-coach. So that's how that all.
Assistant, purely assistant. No, 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 no. Go ahead.
My favorite story was, who is this dad? And why is he here on a Wednesday afternoon with a 2-year-old on his shoulders in the middle of the day? I wonder what he does. And then, like, literally months later, we were looking for a synagogue, and we got to Hakafah, and I looked at Charlie and I was like, hey, wait, that guy looks really familiar. And he goes, Mom, that's Coach Bruce. And that's when I knew I needed glasses. But in any case, that's how we got to Hakafah.
So glad you did. So go and
Yeah,
tell us
me
about
too. So
tell us about them.
Charlie works on judiciary for Senator Durbin on Capitol Hill. Came home at the beginning of the pandemic because of diabetes. Went back in the summertime and now is back with us for the time being. So he is working remotely from our house doing judiciary work. Jack, whose dog this truly is, but who couldn't handle the puppy in an apartment building, lives in Evanston and is attending Northwestern. Andy is a student at Tulane, and he's home for winter break, and he may be the reason why we had Zoom issues, because he's taking his last finals right now, so I hope I'm not messing him up. And then Peter, who is Eli's age, is also a student at Tulane, and he finished finals, so he's now playing with Jack's puppy, who now lives with us.
3 out of 4 at Tulane. What's that about?
It's It's a great place to visit. It's a great school. I love that school. It is a fantastic place for anybody's kid who wants to study anything.
I got into Tulane.
You did.
I did get into Tulane back in
That's
the
great.
80s, and there was no way in heaven my dad was ever going to let me go there, but at least I could say I got into it.
Well, there
So,
you go. And now it's becoming an academic powerhouse, and they do a lot with healthcare, and everybody's interested. So Charlie did poli-sci econ. Andy is doing forensic anthropology, and Peter's doing biomedical engineering. So everybody's got their thing that they can study, and I get to go visit them, which is really lovely. And then on top of it, we have Andy's girlfriend Grace, who is with us for the month. So we've got.
don't you just want to be an empty nester already? I was
You know,
dreaming of that. Not happening ever.
we got a full 3 weeks of empty nest, and I'll be honest, it was a full 3 weeks of cleaning the house, and then and here we are. So it's great to have them. That is really, to me, the joy, the silver lining of this pandemic has been making new memories with these great kids who ditched me and moved out and are now back.
So please do me a favor as we come to a close, if you would. Would you
Okay.
give each of them a hug for me and your husband as well, and the dog?
You bet.
And you know, we haven't crossed paths on our walks looking at, maybe we haven't, we've just been looking at the sky, but I'm in your neighborhood a lot walking. I was just there twice yesterday. But please give them a hug, send our love, and I hope to be able to see all of you sometime sooner than later.
Back to you, Rona, Josh, Noah, Eli, the gang, and
Yeah.
of course, Louise the dog.
So with that, I'm going to say that's the end of this episode of Points of the Circle. See you all soon. Take care. Nancy, bye-bye.
Bye, Bruce.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Great.